few questions submitted by the public. And well, I think I should address the first one to Mrs. Misirloglu, because it's personally addressed to her. Well, short question, but big issue. So, why art should completely lie outside public reason? Is it too rational to be included in the space of reasons?
Angeliki, if you please can repeat, because I didn't hear the question. There was a
Absolutely.
noise from somewhere.
Absolutely. So, why art should completely lie outside public reason? Is it too rational to be included in the space for reasons?
Not at all, but why would someone assume that? Why art should completely lie outside? I think that's what we're saying. I mean, all this inclusive agenda is within public reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the claim,
Excuse me, I have to say that could you please, all speakers except for Mrs. Misirloglu, have their microphones closed, because the sound is really interfering. Thank you.
well, my answer is quite short, because I think that it was quite clear, at least from my point of view, that the whole project and this contingent nature of the new museum ethics I was referring to, I think that it lies completely within the public domain and the public reason also. All this inclusive agenda has to do with the democratization of the arts within the arts institutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's very, very clear, your statement. Okay, next I have a question even shorter. And it is not addressed to someone personally, but I think most of you will have an answer for it. So please just raise your hands. So is utopian art a socially engaged art? Okay. Mrs. Lauder.
I mean, my experience, which is purely based on the Russian experiment, is that most of these utopian projects during the revolutionary period, just before and afterwards, were very much socially engaged. Whether people realized the complexity of the social structure within which they were operating is another problem, and whether they understood the issues of the imperfectibility stroke perfectibility of man is another issue. But what they were all doing was trying to create structures in which men could and women could realize their full potential, and in which were very much socially oriented. And this is particularly of Tatlin, of Anton Levinsky, and of the theorists like Arvatov and Punin. They all felt they were all committed to the revolution as a sense of social uprising. Even Malevich talked about the sense of the revolution as something which opened up new vistas and enabled him to kind of create art for everyone. And so I think, yes, it was very social. Whether it's inevitable that a utopian artist has a social dimension is a completely other question. But I think in Russia, at that particular moment, it had a very strong social dimension and a very strong social commitment.
Well, I think regarding at least the Russian avant-garde, it would be very challenging for us to see this art outside this context.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think people have tried to, and certainly the West kind of strips certain elements of Malevich's work and indeed of Tatlin's work from its kind of very utopian rationale and this very almost messianic, no, that's not perhaps the word to use, but this very strong urge to create a new society for everyone. Tatlin giving flight to every man, to liberate socialist man, liberate him from gravity, which is a sort of metaphor for liberating him from all the oppression, political and social, which he has experienced in the past. And equally, the Monument to the Third International is an incredibly utopian image. It's a structure which will act as a beacon, sending out information, allowing people to become free. I mean, so I feel that it's very much embedded in these artists and this kind of environment. And I don't have any experience of other utopian situations, such as perhaps the Paris Commune or whatever, to kind of judge about art elsewhere. But in Russia, it's very much, and I think it's very difficult to see these things in this way, but they have been interpreted formally and they have been stripped of this kind of strong ideological message in the West, and particularly Malevich, who is seen as a spiritual artist, whereas in fact Unavis in Vitebsk was intended to kind of transform the world, to create a suprematist utopia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mrs. Lauder. I think Mr. Jonas would also like to contribute to the question.
They're wondering if you want to comment on the question of whether all utopias have a social component.
Well, it all depends what you mean with a social component, because there is part of utopian thinking as a logic, as a way of thinking, which is basically what has been concerning me, which is part of history of science. That is the counterfactual thinking and counter the authority, the norms of orthodox science thinking, creating new ideas. So from this point of view, it's very difficult. Utopian thinking is polymorphic. But I wanted with this opportunity to address only one point, which is the idea that utopia is very much associated with utopian socialists who lead us to social democrats, who lead us, after failing, to communists, who lead us to dictatorship. Well, I wanted to remind two things. First of all, it is shocking, but if you would like to be a little bit impure and include Hitler's writings in the discourses we are discussing, Hitler was a utopian, definitely. He wasn't very original. He was actually a second-class thinker and a 10th class academically endowed person. But if you look at the people he was reading in prison or the people who were advising him, you really find utopians behind it. So the other way around, that's what fascinated me with the problem of the Condorcets, Monsieur, Madame. Both of them, without doubt, are, according to any approximation of what is utopia, were utopians. In fact, Condorcet's last work, written in prison, fed both Marx and, as far as I know, Lenin and all those terrible people. But Condorcet, in fact, was trying to express the idea of a possible society based on the respect of every person's point of view. He arrived at a very interesting paradox. It's mathematical. I've written about it. I can send you the material, but it's which was immediately interpreted by the Jacobins as anti-democratic, because he simply said the way you want to run the assembly ends up into not dictatorship, ends up no real liberation. It ends up to an absurdity because without realizing it, there are hidden logical paradoxes in it. What was the solution for Condorcet? Not again, it's a very technically long discussion, but the idea is to go out, go on the top of the way we think about assemblies and form assemblies that almost everybody's opinion is decisive. Now, let me make a short parenthesis. We have the Quakers. I don't know how familiar you are with the Quakers. The Quakers loved openness, democracy, hated dogmatism, authoritarianism. Therefore, they never voted in their assemblies. You had the sense of the assembly, the chairman, if I might use the term, of the assembly said, okay, the sense is this. Or she would say, okay, we'll discuss it again. And then they reformulated the argument so it could slowly arrive to a decision. The unfortunate anarchists, or some of the unfortunate anarchists in Spain, tried to do the same. Result, their head was cut and they're eliminated. So there are all kinds of ambiguities where utopia is leading us. It's leading us to a higher level of knowledge of science. It's leading us to Hitler. It's leading us also to the experiments of Condorcet and the belief of his wife that in the end, the idea of cohesion, community, common goal is built in biologically, and the human institutions exploited part of our biology, which is hedonism. Of course, Freud would say narcissism combined with love of death, and created a society today, in other words, a society end of 18th century, which is monstrous. So I do not come with a conclusion, I come with an invitation that we should try to be as open-ended and inclusive without leading, for the moment at least, to declarations what utopia is about. It's more interesting to look at it as a device of thinking using anti-authoritarian destruction of norms and counterfactuality, suspension temporary of reality. You should read Coleridge about that. And through that, arriving to a better condition for us. That's what I want to say.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Lefebvre.
I wanted to answer the question, address the question that the person asked that started this whole discussion. And that is, are utopias always grounded in some kind of socialist utopia or socially conscious, somehow, yes, socialist situation. I wanted to, of course, this whole conference has to do with a very specific kind of utopia, as Christina Lauder pointed out, and very Russian oriented. There have been other schools of utopian thinking, on the other hand. Frank Lloyd Wright's Usonia was a utopia, and it had absolutely nothing to do with socialist thinking. It was a anarchist capitalist utopia. Ayn Rand's books are all about a kind of libertarian utopia. Buckminster Fuller's writings and vision are very much a technocratic, technological utopia. And of course, the reason I'm underlining this is because my Hypnerotomachia certainly is a utopia, I think, but having nothing to do at all with a socialist utopia. It was a much more early democratic social order, early bourgeois social order. So
sorry, may I explain? Really, I didn't say that all utopias were socialist. I simply
no. I
can only respond in respect to the
ones,
area
yes.
that I knew about Russia. So I want to clear that up in case I didn't make it clear.
No, I didn't make it. I didn't make myself clear. That's what I thought I was saying about you.
The way talking about the 1917 sculptors and monumentalists, maybe it would be interesting to see. I'm not a Russian specialist at all, although my grandmother was in Novorossiysk. If there were people who said in their utopian vision, a city of the future, a communist city, should have no monuments of whatever kind. That's
very interesting. Okay, we have Mr. Seralt and then Mr. Takis would like to contribute. So, Mr. Seralt, please.
Very briefly, I think this is very fascinating discussion. It touches to the point Marco Goldini made. I think even in relation to social class as a class struggle. I would contribute maybe thinking in linking this to the idea of organizational forms in Bogdanov, because all technology and for him class struggle is kind of struggle between organizational forms, which means every social class has an image of society or a form by using ideological and using these forms try to reorganize society in this shape, in this form, or I couldn't formulate it well, but I think this idea, the existence of varieties of utopian thinking is also similar to like scientific thinking, critical thinking, like we see critical thinking in Adam Smith or early, like Kant, has different form of critique than later formulations of critical thinking, like scientific thinking of positivists are very different than later post-positivist or anti-positivist. I think Bogdanov's crucial position in all this discussion, like his Utopia, for example, in Red Star, there are problems. It's not like idealistic, all solutions, like the planet is in trouble, production causing trouble. It's not a utopia going to solve everything. So his scientific thinking is also open, very close to Marx's own. Critical, in a sense, is open. He reads, for example, Ernst Mach influences his thoughts, which also influence Austrian economists like Mises, Hayek. I mean, Mach has an influence on Einstein also. This openness to counter, I mean, the way Lenin criticized Bogdanov in Materialism and Empirical-Criticism is because he's influenced by bourgeois thinkers, like idealists they call, but they are actually materialist and natural monist thinkers he's targeting, while influence of Hegel is not a problem at all. I mean, he's the ideal of most iconic figure of idealism. This is not a problem. This kind of authoritarian thinking about objective truth, for example, it's a dead end, I think, leading to it's not utopia itself, but how do you conceive it? How do you bring it as a project? This is, I think, this is where tragedy and anti-utopia lies. And Zamatyan, I think, Zamatyan, he writes in 1921 that he sees where Red Star goes to, like Bogdanov said at the same time. So it's not, I think, I just cut here because I don't want to take too much time, but it's a great discussion. Great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinal. And now Mr. Takis would like to contribute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should I say a word about that? It's a very interesting argument, but I don't know if I understood it completely. But one point interested me actually, which is your reference to class. In a way, consistently, if we follow the texts of which we might call them utopian in this kind of fuzzy, foggy path, from the time, I'm not talking about primordial times, but from the time of Lycurgus. Lycurgus established Sparta, a new Sparta, on the basis that no class was possible. And we see that coming back again and again. And interestingly, their claim to be the leaders of the Greeks versus the Athenians was that they had the perfect society. That's why they were winning the wars, but also they did not have internal fights as Athens constantly had, exiling its people, killing its prominent minds like Socrates and so on. So the idea of a classless society is utopian, and it can be interpreted through the one aspect of utopia, which is the legal aspect, the construction of norms that do not permit the development of classes. But there is also another path, which is not norms, but facts. That is the path of science. And the argument is, in this case of a classless society, the argument of Madame Condorcet, actually other people had said that before, that human nature is classless. Not because they all have heads and blood and zizi or whatever, but because implanted in their mind was the sense of affection. In other words, the Catholics would say communitas.
Thank you, Mr. Jonis.
Right.
I think we are out of time. We're closing. Would you like to say something conclusive, and then Mr. Takis and have a word?
No, Mr. Takis is going to have a word now.
Uh,
You're over. You're finished, aren't you?
No,
Yeah.
no, I talk
Thank
too
you so
much.
much.
I'm sorry.
It's a pleasure to hear you. Mr. Takis.
Thank you, Angeliki. I will be very brief. Coming back to the issue about the social engagement of utopian art, yes, I think that utopian art is, by definition, always, necessarily so, socially engaged. And I think one can understand this by relating this discussion with what Professor Christodoulides said beforehand, and most of all, relating this discussion with his very useful distinction between the positive and negative gesture, because I think utopian art, in any sense, is socially engaged by its form itself. And what that can be easily understood by having in mind the negative gesture, which is implied in all utopian art, because being released from the topos is the condition of taking critical attitude, irrespective of figurative contents or whatever else. So I think Russian avant-garde was both, for reasons of its content and its form, positive and negative at the same time. And it paid the price for being both. That's it.
Thank you so much. I think this is a conversation that can never end. It was such a little time. And hopefully we will have a second part of the conference very shortly. We will keep the audience, of course, posted when we have new dates and the new circumstances under which the second conference will take part. But I think, and hopefully it will be in person next time.
Definitely.
Definitely. I would like to thank everyone, all of you speakers. It was a great pleasure having you here. So we renew our appointments for the next time. I will follow with a guided tour of the exhibition. I don't know if you want to say goodbye or have a last word. Maria, maybe?
Can you take us with you?
I wish. I wish I could. I wish we could have all of you at the museum, and of course our audience as well, to see the actual exhibition in our collection. But maybe I think next time. I think it's a promise for next time.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. It was a big pleasure to have you here in this conference, at least in this way. It was extremely interesting. And it is a promise to have a second part. Now I see that Mr. Pavlakos has arrived. Do we want to put him in? Is it possible?
Hmm.
No?
I think he can be here right about now, in a moment.
Okay. He sent us a message that he had something urgent with the university, but he rushed to meet us, so he will be here in a second, and I think that he will have a few minutes to say a word. In the meantime, I have to thank you very much, to say that we will be very glad to meet you again live, not online, in Thessaloniki, and to thank very much the organizers of this event, Live Media and Symvoli, for the support of the technical part, which was, I think, very well done. Okay, this is what I wanted to say. Hello, Mr. Pavlakos. You made it finally at the very end. So you can have your own state now before we go to the guiding tour of the Utopia Revisited exhibition that is right now on the walls of our closed museums.
Thank you very much. I really have to apologize for coming so late. Unfortunately, as you can see, I was in a formal panel appointing people, so it was impossible to get out sooner. And I also apologize for jumping in without having followed any of the amazing talks. So I will have to say a few thoughts, hoping that they might be of some interest. In this context of utopias, what intrigues me very much is this idea of utopia as a condition for the possibility of things that we live or experience. So take, for instance, the idea of knowledge. We have knowledge of things. And so what makes it possible that we have the knowledge we have? So take community, society, and so on. Take action. So there is we know what a good action or a right action and a wrong action is. And so I see the discourse of utopia as useful in terms of coming into to examine the conditions for the possibility of those things that we experience, such as, for instance, right action or wrong action. And so I think this type of thinking about utopia contrasts it with perhaps a kind of more traditional way, where the utopia is about something that is ideal and is remote from what is really here, more mundane. And these more traditional views, by building this dualism and the gap in between the real and the ideal, also struggle to bridge it. In this more traditional view, for instance, what is true, beautiful, just is something that is part of the essence of things, or the nature of things. And what I'm looking at is more about what enables, what are the presuppositions for our experiences of truth, beauty, knowledge. Those of course who have spent time on the history of ideas, they see already that these two visions can be mapped against a more traditional view, maybe more ancient view, where the true, the beautiful, and the just are parts of the essences of the world. And then the view I'm proposing is a little bit more modern. We have it with Kant. Kant talks about the conditions of the possibility of what we experience, live, and do. And then, of course, even later, in a kind of more pragmatic sort of tradition of thinking with Wittgenstein, where you have, rules or standards which guide, as it were, the construction of our knowledge, of our action, and so on. So there is this type of contrast, I think. On the one hand, the utopia that is about things that outside what is real and here and now, and then we need to bridge that. And the other view that is about us constructing experiences, knowledge, action, the political community, according to standards that are the presuppositions of what we are already inside. And I think I want to explore that further in the next session, hopefully in the beautiful Nymphi to Thermaikua, the Salonika as the princess of the bay of the Thermaik Bay. I don't know how you say that in Greek, in English.
Probably.
Probably. And so I want to go to this, to explore this sort of more constructivist view, where the utopia is really part of the possibility of what we are immersed in already. And so you don't have to struggle with this gap that you have to cross. And then you don't have all these problems about, utopia, something that is untenable. And I want to do it a little bit in the context of the political community. I spoke to Andreas Takis before today, and we chatted a little bit about what he talked to you today. And I think we are a little bit in the same line or the same project. And I would like to explore this more constructivist, as it were, approach to utopias with respect to political community. What is political relations beyond established state borders? So the idea of a political community that cuts across the established map, the political map of the world. So you have relations that are political that cut across what is already fixed, what is fixed according to the institutional boundaries as we know them today. And I'll stop here. I hope that this offers a little bit, gives a hint of what I'm hoping to do. And thank you very much for listening out at this late stage. And I look forward to the exhibition, actually. And
thank you. We're very glad that we made it on time, in the nick of time. But it was brilliant. Thank you very much. And right next, we will proceed to the 360 virtual tour of the exhibition.